Hi, Josh.
Hey, Bob. How you doing?
Okay. How are you?
I'm better. I'm more calm
better than me, or better than you were?
better than I was. And I didn't know whether to bring this up, but I heard in your recent conversation with Mickey Kaus that he was taking performance enhancing supplementation for the conversation. And I didn't want to show up empty handed. So the reason I'm feeling better is because I'm now taking L-theanine.
Wait a second. How do you spell that? I'm looking for any edge I can get.
L-theanine.
T-A-L-T-H-E-A-N-I-N-E. I'm in.
Yeah.
Should I swallow it or snort it?
Swallow it to start and see how that goes.
See if you want more immediate.
If you don't get the results you're looking for, then you can grind it up and snort it.
And I will have a needle handy just in case that doesn't work. So what is that, like an amino acid or something?
Good guess. It's an amino acid found in tea leaves. And it has a calming without drowsy effect. So I'm much calmer.
I'll give you a grade at the end. I'll tell you whether or not it's worked. Let me introduce us. I am Robert Wright. This is The Wright Show, available on both streaming video and via audio podcast. You are Josh Summers. You've had conversations with me before, including on The Wright Show per se, and then more recently you've done a couple of things that are kind of in the twilight zone. We live streamed them on YouTube and put a couple of them in my audio podcast feed, but didn't put them on the bloggingheads.tv website. Now, but this one will be available through all traditional vectors. And you are, you're a yoga teacher, for one thing. You're something maybe of a mindfulness teacher, inevitably, but more yoga guy. Anyway, we know each other through meditation circles, and we were kind of brought back in contact by the death of Michael Brooks, a mutual, a good friend of yours, somebody who I knew somewhat and had been friendly and collegial with. That led us ultimately to start talking about cognitive empathy, something I had been scheduled to talk with Michael about on his show before his extremely untimely death a couple of months ago. So this is another in a series of conversations that will have at least something to do with cognitive empathy, by which I mean not emotional empathy, not feeling people's pain, but just trying to understand how they view the world. This is something that I claim could solve many of the world's problems if more vigorously exercised by more people. You're not a full-blown skeptic about that, but I don't think you're fully on board as a member of my cognitive empathy cult.
No, I think I'm more I'd be part of your tribeless tribe on that. I think it's more, I think my limitation is that I'm kind of a case study of the type that you warn against. I see myself get whipped up by certain narratives in the media or online, and I feel like my whole perspective on things gets pretty radically skewed at times, and then it takes me a while to claw back to a more sober look at things, and I do have to find myself coming to ways of employing cognitive empathy to do that. So I might have some ideas of what gets in the way of cognitive empathy that differ from yours, but I think fundamentally I see that is a very important piece in the equation or the prescription of moving through this moment.
Yeah. Okay. So we had thought we would try to find some practical applications of challenges to cognitive empathy. And I think we also agreed we want to talk about something that has in a way, I believe, a natural connection to this, which is social media, particularly the pernicious effects of social media. Both of us recently watched this Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, which is about, the much discussed downsides of social media, I'd say. So maybe we should start out with what I concede is in many ways the biggest challenge to cognitive empathy that I've encountered in a long time, which is something that has followed upon the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and that is the Republican plan to, well, I don't even need to elaborate. Everybody knows what they're going to do. They're going to nominate and confirm a Supreme Court justice after having asserted back when the shoe was on the other foot that you should not do that in the final year of a presidential term or after the primaries have started or something that in theory would apply to the current case, and they are saying doesn't.
You can use my words against me. I am not going to do that.
That's your Lindsey Graham. And that's not a bad Lindsey Graham.
No, that wasn't very good. I was thinking I should polish that up, but then I thought
it actually sounded a little more like Bill Clinton, I got to say.
Yeah, that's the Michael Brooks influence that if I go Southern, it can skews towards Clinton.
That was you doing Michael Brooks, doing Bill Clinton?
Doing Lindsey Graham.
Doing Lindsey. I'd like to hear Bill Clinton do Lindsey Graham. Yeah. And, I think, first of all, I think it's always a good exercise to try to understand a perspective that at first strikes you as alien. I'm not sure I'll succeed this time, but here's a start. It's a column you referred me to that was written by Bret Stephens, the neoconservative columnist for the New York Times. And he was actually arguing that the Republicans should not do this. I mean, he's kind of a never Trumper, I think, or an anti-Trumper. But he began by conceding that he understood their pain. He said this was a kind of a mock letter to Mitt Romney, whom he was encouraging to do what Romney wound up not doing, which was opposing this. He wanted him to oppose this Republican maneuver. Stephens writes, "Lest you think I don't get the argument, let me rehearse it." That is the argument for doing what the Republicans are doing. Okay, so here's the argument. There used to be a bipartisan tradition of confirming well-qualified nominees for the court. Democrats trashed it with their trashing of Robert Bork. There used to be a bipartisan tradition of approving well-qualified nominees for lower courts. Democrats trashed it by filibustering George W. Bush's appellate court nominees. There used to be a bipartisan tradition of respecting the filibuster. Democrats trashed it by blowing up the filibuster in 2013. There used to be a tradition of the Judiciary Committee treating nominees with a sense of fairness. Democrats trashed it when they used uncorroborated allegations to try to block and besmirch Brett Kavanaugh. Now, it's funny the way if you're on the other side of an argument, you cannot keep counter arguments from springing to mind, right? They do it so naturally. Like on that last sentence, he said when they used uncorroborated allegations to try to block and besmirch Brett Kavanaugh, I just thought, well, uncorroborated. It's in the nature of an allegation of rape that the only witnesses are the accuser and the accused. I mean, right. It's not like you can hope for. I'm not saying that's worth dwelling on. I'm just saying that's a tribute to how automatically the kind of tribal mind springs to the defense of its tribe.
Right. Yeah, I feel like that was like I was kind of nodding along. I'm like, oh, I can see that point. I can see that point. And then he got to the Kavanaugh thing. I was like, wait, hang on. That's not totally right.
Well, also, it seemed kind of like double counting. He had already done Bork. I mean, it's like, how different is this from Bork? By the way, I once found myself in a green room with Robert Bork. I forget what show we were going to be on. He was, now I think he's died since then, hasn't he? But he was, I'm here to tell you, a very bitter man, and understandably, I guess. But it struck me that I didn't even know the guy. It didn't take long at all to get him to to get him to convey his enduring bitterness over what happened to him. And look, if I were on the verge of being on the Supreme Court and somebody denied it to me, I'd be a little annoyed too. But so the point is, they're seeing this as a slowly escalating arms race of norm violation, and this latest Republican thing being only the latest escalation, and the Democrats having done most of the prior escalations.
Right. It gives historical precedent, and it's not just a one side breaking the rules exclusively scenario.
Right. And I wish I knew my political history well enough to talk about how valid this is or isn't, I'm sure that there are other tits or tats in the ongoing tit for tat that people better versed would mention. But the main point is just that people like you and me, when Mitch McConnell first said, we're going to get this done, we did not naturally think about this, what to the other side is an important part of the context.
Right. The other piece too is, I don't know if you saw Michelle Goldberg's somewhat recent piece, maybe from a few days ago, around the Bork thing, basically suggesting that after that debacle, there's been a kind of an agreed upon taciturn reluctance to be too candid about positions on things like Roe v. Wade from any nominee, because it's basically a way to get chucked out like Bork was before a hearing. But there's, I think Senator Hawley, another Josh, is saying that he will not confirm anyone unless they are adamant and candidly against Roe v. Wade, which she thought would actually play into the Democrats' hands in terms of driving the differences to become more apparent or make it much clearer to the electorate what's at stake right now, rather than keeping it quiet and not really sure what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as a political matter, I think most of the people who are highly motivated by this issue are probably going to vote in any event and already know who they're going to vote for. But I don't know. I'm not like an expert political analyst. Now, do you?
Well, the question I have for you on the table is, given what is about to happen, right? Like, given the kind of the inevitability about what's going to happen, what is a more sober strategy forward, rather than say like an emotional overreaction, overwrought emotional response that could further entrench the issue?
It's a good question. Well, first of all, I mean, let me say that I actually feel very strongly that outrage is appropriate here, and the way I'd put it is, I think what's pretty distinctive here is the combination of the blatantness of the hypocrisy. That is, right. Lindsey Graham on tape again and again saying, you can use my words against me. We will not do this in the last year of a Trump administration. And now saying they'll do it. The blatantness of the hypocrisy and the magnitude of the norm in question. The Supreme Court is a very important institution. It is the court of last resort. Obviously, they may well decide this election. And public belief in the integrity of the court and the validity of the court as a ruling body is critical for that reason. They decided, in effect, their ruling settled the 2000 election. So, and if there's too much cynicism about the court, your country's in deep trouble. And so I think that's why outrage is important. They are, is because this really, really, really matters. The hypocrisy is really, really blatant. And so there. Now, what is the value of not getting overwrought about it, not overreacting to it? I have to admit, first of all, sometimes I have an easier time answering that question than others. Like, there's a lot of times when on social media things happen, people freak out, and I think to myself, you're just playing into Trump's hands by freaking out right now. A media freak out on this will confirm in the eyes of his supporters that the media is not fair. This is more challenging because, for one thing, I don't think so many people on the other side, on the Trump or Republican side of this argument, are going to have a huge amount of trouble understanding what the basic objection here is. It does kind of seem like you guys said, 4 years ago that this was the rule and now you're changing it. But I do think in this case there is a danger of runaway retaliation. Like a lot of people are saying, well, in return for this, we should pack the Supreme Court. That is assuming Biden wins, which I'm not assuming, but assuming Biden wins and you have Democrats controlling Congress, you expand the Supreme Court, add a couple of Democratic appointees, you're in business again. Well, obviously, the danger there is once that's a norm, it just the court just keeps growing. And,
well, it's only good until the next election cycle.
Yeah, and slowly, it isn't just that sometimes it's good for one party and sometimes it's good for the other. It's that the legitimacy of the court itself would clearly decline in the eyes of Americans, and so it becomes bad for the whole system. Unless you think, we need upheaval, revolution or something, and so you need to heighten the contradictions. And so delegitimizing the system is an important step toward long-term progress. That's an argument you can make. But so I guess. But
there's also something I think particularly existential about this particular appointment, in that it, for women's rights, reproductive rights, healthcare, this could really undo a lot of progressive policies over the last couple of decades, and that feels like an existential an eradication of a quality of life or a way of life for many people. And I think that's fueling the outrage in a justifiable way. It's the question I keep having though is okay, that might be true, but then how do we fight this, or how do we push things forward in a way that doesn't lead to what you're just describing with this expanded court and the delegitimization of it?
Yeah. Now, if progressives wanted to be somewhat consoled about specific issues, I guess I would say, there are people, and I actually think Ruth Bader Ginsburg had some sentiments of this kind, although I haven't done my homework. I'm not clear exactly the nature of the sentiments, but there are people who think that we'd be better off if the whole abortion issue were handled legislatively. I mean, obviously there are conservatives who feel that, but there are liberals. I mean, first of all, there are liberals who think Roe was not that it took a certain amount of intellectual gymnastics to even do the ruling, and I think it was certainly not didn't depend on one of the more straightforward readings of the Constitution. But then there are people who think, leaving aside its merits as a judicial ruling, it's just healthier if you work through the legislative process to get abortion rights or whatever you want. Now, I think
healthier. Say a little more of that. Healthier in what sense?
Well, first of all, you're less likely to create a strong pro-life contingent who feels that the issue was basically stolen from them kind of illegitimately, precisely because of the dubious nature of the Supreme Court ruling. I mean, it really is. There's a lot of people who think that this ruling is far from straightforward. It depends on there being a right to privacy in the Constitution. You can read the entire Constitution and you will not find a right to privacy. So, I mean, I'm a little rusty on this, but I think in Roe versus Wade, they had to assert that you could kind of infer from, from parts of the Constitution that a right to privacy was meant to prevail or something. So, whenever you have a ruling like that, it allows the people on the other side of the issue to say, this is not fair. It'd be one thing if you went to the legislature and got your abortion rights that way. Hard for us to complain, right? They might find a way, but it's harder. So that's one sense in which it it would be healthier. Arguably, it's what people say. I mean, there's still the question of is it state legislature, is it national legislature? I think what will happen, it looks now like Roe may be overturned within 4 years. And I think what will happen is it will return to the state legislatures. By and large, blue states will have abortion rights. I think that kind of division may deepen the red-blue divisions in the country to the extent that different states have different rules governing these various kinds of social issues prevailing. You'll just have your liberal kids leaving the red states faster than ever to go to college, and so the divisions may get more pronounced. But that's a tangent.
There was another article in the Times that caught my eye by a guy named Spencer. I can't do his last name, Bocat Lindell or something like that. And he quoted these legal scholars who were basically saying, like, one way to work through this is if the Democrats regain control, to change the ruling within the court whereby it wasn't a simple majority, but you need a supermajority to change these constitutional issues. And he felt like that would be a way to they felt like that would be a way to keep it out of, like, try to keep some of these things out of the court, or keep the court from getting too much power on these and keeping it at the legislation level.
No, wait, the supermajority would be required where?
To change anything to do with the like any constitutional interpretations, that would be require.
But I mean, it would be required by the at the Supreme Court level, 6-3. Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I mean, somebody would have to rule, I guess, on which issues qualify for that. But yeah, well, that would have that probably would have meant Roe. I don't know what the vote was on Roe. Probably would have meant Roe never happened. Right. Now it would mean the opposite, I guess, if you installed it now. There is one thing I want to emphasize that I think this example drives home. To say, to see the other side's point of view is not the same as conceding that the other side is right. It's just to understand why they think they're right. It's funny. Have you heard about the famous Princeton-Dartmouth football game in the early 1950s?
I think it rings a bell.
It was the subject of a big study because it was a famously rough game. Lots of penalties were called, I think more on Dartmouth than on Princeton. Two psychologists, one at Dartmouth, one at Princeton, did a study and established that when you showed the films to students from Princeton and to students of Dartmouth, I mean, it sounds very commonsensical, but it was the first kind of quantitative demonstration of this kind of tribal kind of confirmation bias, I guess, that, the Princeton students thought Dartmouth players had committed a lot more penalties than the Dartmouth students did, and that the Princeton players had committed fewer penalties than the Dartmouth. The funny thing is, though, that if you look at kind of the average number of penalties that were thought to have been committed, you average the two sides, you still do come out thinking Dartmouth played dirtier. I mean, that was the consensus. It was the view of the referees. It was the aggregate view of the two sides in a certain sense, if you added up all the, and it's funny. I know John McPhee, the writer, famous New Yorker writer. I know him, and I took a course from him, and he was at Princeton at the time, and his roommate was the quarterback for Princeton, Dick Kazmaier, All-American, whose nose was broken that game, and I think his nose, something was broken. And when I brought up this, John's first reaction was, yeah, Dartmouth did play dirty. And he was right. I mean, he probably himself exaggerated the extent to which that's the case. But this is like the most famous study of this kind in the annals of psychology. And I think one thing it illustrates is to say that we are all biased and are not doing a good job of seeing the other side's perspective is not the same as saying that there's no such thing as right or wrong.
Right. It's not an even thing. And, well, that's sort of keeps coming up in many of the conversations I'm having with friends around, what's going on right now. And one friend I was speaking to is basically saying, look, what the Republicans did in 2016 was, not right, not good, but for us to block, for us to block them now is also would not be right in terms of what the Constitution dictates. And we should go high in a certain sense. We should try to play it high and do what we can within the Constitution, play by the rules to win that way, rather than kind of stooping to that level. But then again, it's like the outrage of the existential issue. It's like, well, it's how much can you play by the rules if the other team is willing to transgress those rules so frequently?
Yeah, and it's ultimately a tough question. I mean, today's big story, I haven't even had time to look at it, but it's this Atlantic cover story by Bart Gellman, who won the Pulitzer Prize for his Edward Snowden stuff for the Washington Post. And he's saying that the Republicans are planning to get, I guess, state legislatures to basically get the state electors, the ones who populate the Electoral College, to defy, in some cases, the popular vote in the state, which would be, I guess, technically legal, but the violation of a major, major norm. It has just come to be agreed that the electors go to the winner of the popular vote in your state. And that would be a different kind of challenge. That's it.
Yeah. And these all feel like over the cliff challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, they really do. So I need to take another L-theanine, I think, because if I were you, I would start snorting it. I think
I started, because it does. This is where I was, over the weekend, where I had actually watched The Social Dilemma, the Netflix movie we're going to talk about.
Right.
Watched that before Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed. And, when she passed, it just, like, as I said to you offline, it was like, it just felt like this major keystone of the foundation of everything that was holding us together just slid off the cliff. And, and there was this sort of feeling of things crumbling under your feet as it was going on.
Right.
And you said you'd be able to talk me down.
Well, so I said I what I had said, I think, is that I'd be able to talk you down from your. I make no promises, no. But I think to the extent that I expressed hope that I could do that, it was about your reaction to the movie The Social Dilemma, probably. And we've called it both documentary and a movie. It's kind of both. It's mainly a documentary. It's mainly getting people who have worked at Silicon Valley companies like Facebook and Google to tell you how horrible things are, how destructive.
There it is.
That was what happens when you say Google, and it sounds like you said hey or okay before the word Google. Where were we? Oh yeah, so people who work at these companies telling you how bad things are. Most of it was stuff I had heard, right? I mean, were there any true revelations for you? It was
nothing was terribly new. It was just more the comprehensive picture of it all together. When I watched it, that gave me this very uncomfortable feeling that not only I had been bamboozled myself, but I was, coming conscious of my own hacked addiction to these things, and it was a very uncomfortable, it was like nauseating feeling in a way. That
what was the most alarming, or what were some alarming? Because they talked about various aspects of this. Okay, they're addictive. They're bad. They can be bad for the psychology of adolescents if their stuff doesn't get liked.
Yeah, I mean, I was aware of the addictive side and you know how much they hack the dopamine feedback loop where you see something you like, you get a like and the dopamine reinforcement. I knew all about that. I think the thing that, and maybe they overplayed this in the movie, but the algorithmic way that they were just, that these programs try to figure out and anticipate precisely the kind of content that will get you further hooked. I mean, it's like, it's the if a slot machine is Coke, then, you know, the social media stuff is more in the realm of crystal meth.
Yeah. Wait, remind me which is more insidious?
Oh, I haven't done neither. I think it's crystal meth that's more insidious.
Okay.
Has much more addictive potential.
Actually, I think it just may be cheaper, and so more of a problem for that reason. But whatever. Which brings us back to Mickey. We should emphasize that he was not doing illegal performance-enhancing drug. It was kind of a joke. It was Sudafed, but right. Sudafed is the stuff that in a bathroom meth lab you could use to make actual amphetamine. There were two things that got my attention. One was this good metaphor for what they do. One of these Silicon Valley former executives said, it's like what the algorithms do is try to find the rabbit hole that's closest to your interests or closest to your inclinations or closest to one of your weaknesses, you know, and then drag you down. It's like I was once on YouTube and it's like they advertised some baseball game where a fight broke out. Well, who doesn't want to see a fight break out in a baseball game? I clicked, I watched it, and the next time I'm there, it's like all I'm being offered almost, or at least an increased percentage of what I'm being offered is violent content, including at athletic events. And that in conjunction with, the substantive point that I hadn't quite grasped was that the way these algorithms work, if they find that you are inclined toward any kind of conspiracy theory, they will show you other kinds of conspiracy theories. So they find people who are generally inclined to conspiracy theories and just try to draw them into the various theories. And I don't even know that was written into the algorithms per se. It may just be an algorithm that says, well, find other people who liked this video and see what else they like and show the person the other videos they like. That alone will do this. Mm-hmm. But those were two new things, kind of one a metaphor and one an actual property that was scary.
Yeah. And I think, you know, to put it in context with our conversations, the whole thesis seemed to just underline in big Sharpie black ink the conditions that are continually driving people's ability to have a conversation because of the polarization of view. Like you're getting just siloed by these algorithms and getting into your own Facebook echo chamber in a way. But you know, I did come across some criticism of the movie that I think is worth mentioning, which is that the movie, the thesis is basically it's like the algorithmic, profit-driven social networks that are at the root of our civil discourse in a way. And one of the criticisms coming from a guy named Casey Newton at The Interface, which I found on The Verge, he was saying that it's a little bit, that explanation's a little too facile, that there's online platforms that are not algorithmically driven that have also contributed to unrest and real world violence. So he gave the example of like chat groups on WhatsApp that led to lynching in southern India earlier this year, I think. And so that really questions the main thesis of the movie, that it's these algorithmic social networks that are so invidious, and that if you take into the fact that it's also these chat rooms and chat sites or chat apps that it's mobile communication itself that is kind of at the root of some of this.
Well, is it mobile communication, or is it the fact that you can have these very narrow band conversations in conversation groups? I mean,
yeah, well, that's the thing. It's the platform that the technology allows for like-minded people to gather and find each other, and then to kind of get into the echo chamber.
Right. That's really useful, because there are the two phases. I mean, on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever. First, people naturally congregate with like-minded people. And it didn't used to be possible to do that except in real physical space. And that kind of limits some of the power of the dynamic, you know, if
can only go so far, right?
Yeah.
How many times can you meet in an elk room lodge?
Right. So electronic media were inherently broadcast media when I was a kid. And so there's that. But then after that, you know, Casey Newton is right. That alone can lead to trouble. But when on top of that, you put these algorithms, and it can be just as simple as, I mean, let alone algorithms, just in the common sense, just the motivation to amass Twitter followers. Once you are with members of your own tribe and you're mainly following each other, and you're in a somewhat polarized political environment, the way to get followers is to highlight the most egregious thing done by the other side. And I wrote a piece about this in the Nonzero newsletter, which people can get at nonzero.org for free. And, you know, that alone adds kind of tremendous power to the kind of tribalizing dynamic. You know, I just today I saw a couple of tweets that I realized are in a particular genre of the, I guess you might call it manufactured hypocrisy or something. In other words, you act as if there are lots of people on the other side who are saying these two things, okay, at once, and are therefore hypocritical, when in fact there probably aren't many people saying both of them in exactly that way. So here's one of them. This was, I guess Tucker Carlson came out kind of in defense or something of that 17-year-old kid in Kenosha who killed two people. I assume he said, well, it was in self-defense or something, who knows. But so this person on Twitter brings Trayvon Martin into it and says, a black 13-year-old with a bag of Skittles is an obvious threat, but a white 17-year-old with a semi-automatic weapon is just a kid playing cops and robbers. Well, nobody has ever said that a black 13-year-old with a bag of Skittles is a threat. By just, you know, I mean, there can be a black, you know, they would say that this particular kid with Skittles, they might have said he was a threat in some sense, or that he became a threat to whatever that guy's name was. Once they started fighting or something. But nobody has ever said that any black kid with Skittles is a threat, okay? And now, granted, maybe not many people reading it would be that literal-minded about it. But there's also the fact that we didn't even know how many people are defending both Trayvon Martin and the 17-year-old. I mean, both the guy who killed Trayvon Martin and the 17-year-old. So... but that's an example of a follower-getter, right? It's like, maybe that's not the most horrible imagined hypocrisy in the world or manufactured hypocrisy, but if you did it more egregiously and more dishonestly, it would still get you followers in this environment.
Right. That's the calculus of the attention economy in a way,
yeah.
Right? And if you're gonna play that game, you gotta ratchet up the outrage and the very things you're describing. It's yeah, and that's what gets rewarded.
Yeah, and that doesn't even involve any fancy algorithms. Then when you do throw in an algorithm that maximizes engagement, just a simple one like, oh, if this tweet is getting a lot of likes and retweets, let's show it to a bunch more people, then the dynamic is just amplified.
I mean, you're probably not going to like this solution, but there's a guy in DC named Cal Newport who's written about digital minimalism, and it's really become a manifesto for a different quality of, or different kind and different quality of life in the modern age. Of basically, he argues, get off social media as fast as you can, or if you must use it, titrate it to specific chunk block hours in your week, or your scheduling to go into it. But otherwise, put it away and do something deeply valuable and rewarding and meaningful in your life. Mm-hmm. Basically, take back your life. And I mean, there's a romantic appeal that I kind of I like. I don't know how. I don't know if it will get much traction. He is getting more popular, and I know there are more people out there that are trying to follow along with the digital minimalist.
No, I don't mind that. I mean, see this smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it's a Huawei smartphone, so take that, Donald Trump. I bought it a few months ago, and I have not put Twitter on it yet. Now, my old smartphone was still working, and it has Twitter on it. And so if I really need to go somewhere where I'm going to have Twitter, I can take that. But this is significantly cut down on the time I spend on Twitter, and that has pros and cons. I don't think it's a bad thing. I would think that the objection this guy gets is that, like, well, this is unilateral disarmament. I mean, if all the progressives do this or all the conservatives do this, the other side will win.
Yeah, he's not. I don't think he's really talking about it on the political level. He's talking more the individual, just quality and sanity of life.
As far as mental health goes, I think I'm all for it. You
could make a case if the political folks on the social platforms did adopt a scheduled, bounded period of time that they were going to use it. It could cut down the amount of gratuitous outrage and gratuitous sharing and trolling that goes on. But well,
of course,
whether that's going to happen or not.
The problem may be that the people most inclined to do this were not the problem to begin with, and but they may have at least fallen for the share bait often enough that they helped juice the algorithm. Mm-hmm. But this basic problem that the way to elevate your stature within your own tribe is to vilify the other tribe, even if dishonestly, or just to accurately highlight behavior by someone on the other tribe that is the most egregious behavior committed by the other tribe that day, and then people take that as typical of the other tribe when in fact it's not. This was a big theme in the piece I wrote for my newsletter.
No, and I've been really watching that dynamic play out since we had that conversation. And since you wrote that in the newsletter and we chatted about it last time, just whether it's online or in the news, you do see an extreme form of behavior that seems to be taken as typically indicative of the behavior of the other side, and then that proliferates a kind of outrage against it and mobilizes a whole kind of way of responding that is not appropriate to what's actually going on.
Yeah, it's
taking the availability bias, taking one example and then applying it to the whole.
But even there, people ask about the unilateral disarmament. Like, if only the other side is enraged, and we're not enraged, they'll pack the court, or they'll do this. They'll violate this norm and keep their president in power, and we won't, or they'll whatever. And it's not a trivially easy concern to dismiss. But I think. In terms of the digital minimalism, if there's one thing I don't like about just completely opting out, it's that in principle, being online and being somewhat engaged can be a challenge to practice mindfulness, to be aware of your feelings and
I should be clear though, the digital minimalism code is not so much about becoming a neo-Luddite and just getting away from it entirely. It's more about curating and designing one's use so that the use is in line with your stated objectives in your life rather than being used by it in a way, which I think is what most people find themselves struggling, just having this albatross around your neck of tweeting, buzzing things.
Yeah, well, even what I did is just take it off my smartphone, and it'll probably eventually I'll put it back on. I don't know, but it's just an incremental step.
Don't do it though.
Don't put it back on.
Don't put it back. It's amazing what the difference is.
But it's a tough question because if you believe in your values and you want to advance them on Twitter, you need followers. Less time you spend on Twitter, probably the fewer followers you'll have because you just won't be tweeting. You won't be, it's tough.
Unless you spent your other time off Twitter writing trenchant articles and then putting those out and then that's what you're distributing on the social feeds. So you're giving more valuable perspective and content than
that's in principle possible. Yeah. It's still hard to get the word out if you don't have Twitter. I mean, unless you're writing for.
Well, you can stay on Twitter. I'm not saying get off it. I'm just saying titrate a little bit.
But I mean, the bigger following you have, the better off you are. But I do think there is the thing I started to allude to. There's just the challenge of being mindful while on social media. Like you see something, you're tempted to share it, or whatever your reaction is. Observe your reaction before doing anything. Observe what feelings are aroused. Ask yourself if they should, if you want them to be your guide. That if you can meet that challenge, then I think you can both preserve your mental health on social media and be a constructive player on social media. You'll be better able to engage people from the other tribe in ways that do not further inflame them. And in fact, maybe even give them some reason to believe that, who would have guessed, but people in your own tribe are not all horrible. And that's progress. Mm-hmm. But it's hard.
Yeah, I think it's really, and I think the design of it all, it makes it especially hard. There's just the lack of context for everything there. Whether it's human context of tone, facial expression, or historical context or situational context, and then the juxtaposition of the motley kind of randomness of what's getting sent at you, I think just in a way starts to diminish or destabilize an ability to have that mindful perspective.
Yeah. There's also choosing your feed. Like, who are you going to include in your, who do you want to follow? Who do you want to unfollow or mute? And that's, you can make various arguments for various feed compositions, but, it can be helpful to exclude the worst kind of trolls and grifters in your own tribe, I think. And maybe include people from the other tribe, including both some calm, reasonable people who won't drive you nuts, but also it's maybe good to keep up with what the trolls are doing. I don't know.
This question will sound a little overblown, I think, but after watching that movie and thinking about it, I had the feeling that we're all kind of complicit in this horrible experiment that's ruining the fabric of society. And that if we imagine, I wanted to pose you a question, if we imagine 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, when the histories have been written about this time, and we look back at what this technology, whether it's the social networks or the devices themselves, what this technology has done and changed in terms of human interaction and discussion and conversation. Would you have any predictions about what those histories might say? And this is where it's overblown. Is it at all analogous to, say, a German who might have said in 1930 or 40, 39, 40, I didn't know what was going on at Dachau or Auschwitz. I didn't know.
Well, let's see. You'll have to flesh that out a little. I mean, what would be the analog of the concentration camps right now? I mean, right now, I don't think there's anything like that going on in America.
No, there's not necessarily that, but in terms of the devastation, the degradation of the fabric of what holds us together,
right?
We're all users. We're all kind of nodding along with it. Even if we don't like it, we're still on there. We're begrudgingly doing it, and we're contributing to this space that is just undermining everything. And push back on that view too. It's that was the view I see.
So I think the analog. So I think the analog would be like somebody in the 30s in Germany saying, "Well, yeah, it bothered me that Jewish merchants were XYZ, whatever they were supposedly doing, and I complained about it, but I didn't know that it would lead to whatever." In other words, the intensification of emotion ultimately leads to a cataclysm, and you were part of the intensification.
Yeah, and then there's parts of the movie I really didn't like. Like I think the family reenactment stuff, like the after school.
This is the social dilemma. I didn't finish the thought as to why we call it a movie as well as a documentary, but it did have this. Well, there were two in my mind kind of hokey parts. There was the family part where the adolescent kid is whatever, can't give up his smartphone, and then there was the part where they personified the algorithms, right? Where they had these three guys who I think were the same actor, but
no, it was a trio of the same cyborg that was programming the user,
right?
And it felt like we went into it was very Matrix, Inception like, and kind of sci-fi.
But anyway, go ahead. So the movie part you were saying.
Well, no, I didn't like the movie, like the family scene. I felt like that was a bit overblown. But that science fiction side of it, I do think drove home the point that, that was the chilling disquietude that I felt like that. There was one point where the user was kind of getting pinged or sort of toggled back and forth between the programmers, and he was like turning here and like looking at things and turning over here and looking at something, and that felt just way too close to home for not just for me, but just what I observed around me, or at least I used to observe when things were not so socially distanced. There's just this reflexive addiction that we're all succumbing to.
Right. So, I think you're right, and it's worth sketching out and maybe defending more than I did this particular gimmick where they imagined these three guys at mission control controlling this one person, which of course is not a very good business model if you got to pay three people to mind each Facebook user. But anyway, the point was that
those three people were just personifying the algorithms.
Of course, yes, that's what I mean. So I'm kidding, but the and the point was, although, as I said, the algorithm is not thinking, well, let's draw them down this rabbit hole, and in a way that, as I said earlier, may not even have been what the people who built the algorithm were thinking per se. They may have done something as generic as, say, show him videos that other people who liked this video liked, period.
Yeah.
It may be that simple, but the point is, it winds up being as if while you're on social media, there was somebody at Facebook monitoring you and going, now show him this. Now, show him that he was tagged in this photo. Show him, and in that way, the gimmick is valid. It is, and they could have stood to maybe flesh that out. That a little. That.
Well, that was your YouTube. Like, let's look at a baseball fights video.
Right.
Like the guy in the video had I don't know, for whatever, was it his parent? One of his parents said, let's not have you use this for a set period of time, whether it's a day or a week. And he was going through this tech withdrawal, and his phone had been put into a lockable cookie jar, which, by the way, I want to, you're going to laugh.
You want to recommend?
I purchased that lockable cookie jar 2 weeks before I watched the movie.
That's eerie.
And it is, well, I mean, I've heard Tristan Harris and others talk about that. And
he's in the documentary. He's a former Facebook exec who's now a crusader.
I think he was the former design ethicist at Google, actually.
Was he at Google?
Yeah, I think he was at Google. I'm pretty sure. It amounts to the same thing, but yeah, you know, and that actually is the best thing I've bought in a while. Like it's amazing. Once that thing is locked up, your nervous system like just sheds the vibrating, twitching feeling.
You want to know a great money saving technique? Don't buy the lockable cookie jar. Don't buy the stuff you put in it. No, I know you want to get to eat the stuff sometimes. I take.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, like that whole trick of the program that says you've been tagged by a friend, the email, the notification pop up is like that intoxicating. Like who wouldn't want to click on that? And the kid smashes the cookie jar to get into it.
And it is as effective as if there were a single person at Facebook monitoring you and sending you the little rushes. So yeah, one thought on your historical question, and that's like, I would say the good news is that this stuff is very new and we are just working our way through how to use it. Now, the bad news, I think, is it seems to me that by and large, technological change has been accelerating, and I don't see a reason it will stop, which would mean that we are going to have less and less time to respond to destabilizing things. And that is a source of concern to me, as is the fact that our political system, our system of governments, seems incapable of focusing long enough on solving actual problems that we can count on them to do much about this. Which takes us back to where we began, I guess.
Yeah, no, and it brings up the phrase that Andrew Sullivan said in his last newsletter, which is that he just feels that the whole system is buckling, the whole thing. And he talked about the Social Dilemma movie itself, too.
Did he say that himself? I kind of scanned that issue of the newsletter.
Yeah, no, this is the first election where he felt like, you know, in past elections, things may have been contentious, but at the end of the day, after all the votes were counted, there would be both parties would agree to it, and we'd move on. And that's all in question at the moment. I mean, I know the little I've heard of you speak on that. It seems like you feel confident that Trump will accept the outcome.
Well, I don't think he will defy the judicial branch. That's what I meant. I don't think it'll get to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will say one thing, say you got to leave the White House, and he'll say no. I still don't think that's going to happen. Now, the story in the Atlantic about, I guess I haven't even read it, but I think it's about what state legislatures could do with respect to the Electoral College. That I now see a new avenue that he could use that's not technically illegal to, in one sense, thwart the will of the people. But I do think, he's not going to say, screw you, Supreme Court, I ain't going. I absolutely, I feel I can guarantee you that that's not going to happen.
Well, I hope you're right.
Well, I think that's the least of our concerns. I mean, but I mean, I doubt it'll get to that point.
Even if it doesn't get to that point, it's more, and he does step down if he's voted out. The energy, the kind of discourse, the kind of
it's a mess.
To do. He's not going to stop.
Oh yeah, I'm an alarmist in general by my nature, but I just think this particular thing. He has not defied a single court. He has had many court rulings go against him as president. I don't think he's defied one. Right? He complies, and I just think it would not be tenable. You would not have the support of all kinds of relevant people, including probably the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, if it came to that.
So let's maybe tack towards I don't know if you want to get into prescriptive mode at all. Like this is sort of the implicit dharma of Bob type question. But if you could wave your magic wand and offer a suggestion or a practice right now on it for what's going on with the court nominee, and what would you like the progressive side to, or the left side to do in a way that wouldn't inflame or wouldn't create blowback that would further entrench the very issue that the problem that we're dealing with?
Oh, I'm not sure I have a game plan. I mean, I do think, the business of retaliating with norm violations of comparable magnitude, like packing the court, I'd say, there is a place in deterrence for credibly threatening a nuclear option. That's the way nuclear deterrence works. We told the Russians, Moscow will go if New York goes, and vice versa, and no nuclear war happened. So I could see kind of, if you could make that as a credible threat somehow, but I don't think that's just possible in the nature of things. I mean, there's no... Well,
does that bluster of we're going to expand the court, from Schumer, does that even rattle McConnell's cage? Or does he just say, oh...
No, I don't think so, because first of all, I think Trump is the key guy, and I suspect he's thinking about this strictly in terms of electoral politics. I'm sure he's convinced that this will help in the election, and that's it. That's the end of the story. Trump doesn't care about the Republic. I mean, he doesn't care about anything except how much attention he's getting and how much stature and power and money he has.
Well, I guess that's part of the question is, do you feel that focusing on the court issue is wise? Does the election become about the court, or does it become about, say, the pandemic, or Trump's handling of the pandemic and what that has caused? I mean, if Trump's able to swing the narrative to be about the court pick, just like if he was able to swing it to be about law and order, I would think that is not such a good thing for anyone that wants to see him out.
Well, I think there's a limited number of people he's playing to on this. It's not like that's what it will be. The whole election will be a referendum on. But I mean, I guess one piece of advice is worry about the things you can do something about. And a certain number of these things, I don't know. I mean, he's going to do this. They're going to do this. And the question is what you do about it. And I mean, there are some lesser forms of kind of retaliation. I gather that if we had if both the presidency and Congress were in Democratic hands, I gather we could make D.C. a state. Is that, you probably don't know either for sure, but I've heard that bandied about. That seems to me a good kind of medium, level thing. I mean, some people even talked about Puerto Rico. That would get a lot more blowback from the other side and make other forms of retaliation more likely. But D.C., it's like kind of not that easy to argue that the people in D.C. shouldn't have senators.
Right.
Anyway, so I don't know. I should. We've been doing this more than an hour, and I'm afraid that in 5 minutes someone else may show up in this Zoom space. Zoom space is a
double dipping in Zoom.
Oh yeah, I could have handled it otherwise.
Well, I'm gonna grind up my L-theanine and
just snort. No, let's promise that for next time. Next time,
do some yoga.
What?
I'll do some yoga and
do some yoga. Now, one final question for you: How in your own life, how integrally related are yoga and mindfulness? I mean, in my life, I think of mindfulness as something that I practice via meditation, and then try to practice in everyday life. But I mean, in terms of the discipline, it's a meditative thing. But it can play a role in yoga, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the modern form of yoga, there's such a hybridization, syncretic kind of drawing from all different strands of things that there's a lot of mindfulness that's taught in current yoga.
Uh-huh.
So and the style that I teach, you in the yoga system, you'd stay in a pose for upwards of 5 minutes and all relaxed in a way. But that becomes a mini meditation or mini opportunity to practice mindfulness.
This is
yin yoga. And actually,
yeah.
my argument on it is that there's something about this style of yoga where you're intentionally coming to an edge of mild discomfort, meaning you're when you stay in a pose, the sensations in the area that you're influencing start to get a little achy and bitter and not so pleasant. Now you're meant to tolerate that. And I think when working with that achiness, you can start to see very clearly, just as you would on your meditation cushion, the differentiation between your experience on the level of sensation and then the level of your experience of mental reaction to it. And that gives you, I think, a greater perspective on how the conditionality between physical sensation and the emotional reactions that blow up in response to them. And you can start to, recognize those patterns with more speed. Yeah, I used to teach by Fenway Park in Boston. And the students after the yoga class would say that the drunk Red Sox fans on the subway don't bug them anymore after they do the yoga class. And that's kind of like, I see as a nutshell, the mindfulness practice when it's going well is that the person is able to have much greater agency in terms of how they respond to stimuli.
Well, that's comes in handy on social media. So maybe maybe next time we'll talk more about that side of things. Maybe talk a little yoga and other get into other things that mindfulness naturally leads to, or that the subject of mindfulness naturally leads to. So
yeah,
thanks.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, yeah. I mean, I in theory love the idea of mindfulness being an antidote to emotional reaction or overreaction on the public sphere and promoting greater ability to cognitively empathize. I feel like I'm a bad example. In a way. I mean, I'm a failed case in many respects, but yeah, we could definitely look into that more.
Okay, well, keep track of your failures and things you see on social media that make you fail or that are challenging, and we can talk about them next time.
And maybe this is a carrot I'll dangle. I did have an encounter with my neighbor and the white dog.
So veteran listeners and watchers will remember. They'll definitely be on the edge of their seat waiting for the next episode.
Yeah, they'll send their 3 weeks rough. No, it's maybe the week after Michael Brooks died. I left my door and this little white dog that's always off leash came out and gave us an earful, gave my dog and myself an earful. And I proceeded to go apoplectic on them.
And then we talked about how you might conceivably have exercised mindfulness and or cognitive empathy, but don't tell them how you did. We will find out on the next episode. So thank you, Josh. And we will see you again. Okay.
Stay calm.